Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to this LFC Daytrippers special with James Pearce. James is with us this evening to talk about the new book that he's involved with, called "At the End of the Storm." Stories from Liverpool's historic title win. It includes stories from James Pearce, Oliver Kay, Simon Hughes, and others from the Athletic, from Backpage Press. James, you're a busy man today. I've seen you all over the internet. Not giving out bad news, as people like to tell you that you do, but
Not
indeed to
today.
talk. Yeah, not today, on your day off, but indeed to talk about this book that's come out, and it's it's different, isn't it? Because usually when there's a sporting achievement, you're writing it today and you're thinking back to things that have happened in a season or whatever it might be. But this is about stories from the time, and it's slightly different, and I have to say I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a bit different. It's really, really proud of the fact that there is this kind of nice keepsake from what was such a historic season, and I think it's just nice to have it all in one place, in hardback, and it's the publishers have done a fantastic job with it, and it was something that didn't involve a great deal of extra work for me, because of course it was all there. It was they went away and picked what they felt was the best of the Liverpool coverage across the whole of the season, and then it's only really when you flip back over it and look at it that you think, God, it really was a season unlike any other, with so many subplots along the way, and just amazing memories. And then of course, when you're so close to history, for it suddenly to be thrown into jeopardy by the pandemic, and then having to wait all that time before Liverpool's 30-year wait was finally over. So certainly a season I don't think any Liverpool fan anywhere in the world will forget, and hopefully people will enjoy reliving every step of the way.
I think they will. I have to say, I've read the vast majority of the book. I tried to concentrate on parts that you were involved in, obviously, because, I'm talking to you. But like I said, you're reading this book, and, you're reading stuff from July, August, September, right through until July of this year. And when you're reading them, you're seeing people put words on the page, and you know what's already happened, if you get me, instead of them talking about it in the past tense. It's real time, and that's what really got me as I was reading. And I have to be honest with you, I opened the book, I read the introduction, and the first chapter that was there was yourself going to talk to Tom Werner. And what's he like as a man, James? What's he like as a man to me?
Yeah, he's a really interesting, knowledgeable, charismatic guy, actually, and I think he's kind of the out of the three kind of central figures of FSG in terms of the ownership. Of course, Tom is the only one really who has kind of a bit of a public kind of face in terms of doing media, because John W. Henry very rarely speaks, and Mike Gordon, I don't think he's ever been quoted externally, maybe a couple of times internally in terms of the club website. But yeah, I think Tom Werner, with his background, of course, in TV, I think he's very comfortable, speaking to the media. And I think he's always, I really enjoyed doing that interview, because it was also kind of on his territory, because it was during the pre-season tour of the States, and he very kindly afforded me a good hour of his time in his office at Fenway Park, and he just had the kind of interior kind of decorating guys
Yeah,
redoing his office out, because Pride of Place on the wall was one of those iconic photos from Madrid.
yeah,
And I think you could tell how much it meant to them, to Tom Werner, and he said it was the same for John and for Mike, sharing that moment. And I think also, what struck me from that chat was they very much saw that as the start in Madrid. It wasn't like, we've won the European Cup, our work here is done. It was very much like, right, it's taken us a long time to get this club to where we wanted it to be, but now this has to be the start of something. And he picked his words carefully that day when he was talking about the Premier League being next. But yeah, you could sense that they really did feel that Madrid was going to be just a huge kind of milestone in FSG's reign of Liverpool, because I think, like everyone, we all knew that was the trigger, wasn't it? I think, suddenly the disappointment of getting 97 points and being edged out by Man City, almost evaporated, because then you go and win the club's 6th European Cup. All those cup final defeats, all those near misses, suddenly, the heartache of that is eased, and Liverpool went into the 1920 season on this amazing high.
They absolutely did, but when I was reading this, you're saying that the picture from Madrid takes pride of place in his office, and you do get people that will throw it at them that that they invested in the club, they're looking for a return, do they care, how often are they here, stuff like that, offices in London, etc., etc., etc. But when you read from him, he seems a very warm man, he seems a very welcoming man, and just for him to say that everyone involved in FSG are completely and so proud of what happened in Madrid, it was unbelievable. The second thing that came over for me, though, was he talks about Klopp, and he describes him as exceptional and how much he absolutely and utterly trusts him. When you it's hard not to, when you look at those words around Klopp, it's hard not to go, yeah, that's absolutely spot on. But the thing that struck me was, I thought immediately reading that was transfer window last season, because we bring in Harvey Elliott, we bring in Adrian, we bring in Sepp van der Berg, and there's very little money involved. Two of them are really, really young players. One is a backup goalkeeper. And again, at the time, people were saying, they won't spend the money. We've won the European Cup and they won't spend the money. It kind of showed to me in that, James, that Klopp not calls all of the shots, but if Klopp decides that he wants something, and that be, a couple of young players and a backup goalkeeper, I'm going to go with that, I'm happy. They absolutely and utterly trust him, regardless of the situation.
Yeah, and also, I think the other important thing is the relationship is so strong between Klopp and the owners, and that really came through in that conversation I had with Tom Werner and the discussions I've had with him since that day as well, when obviously I interviewed him again shortly after the title was mathematically wrapped up, because Klopp, he's earned that trust and faith, hasn't he, by the unbelievable progress and transformation he's overseen at Liverpool, and I think that was a big thing for me, that you could just tell that if Klopp needed something, then they back him to the hill. It was, of course, there's parameters that he has to, financial parameters that they have to live within their means. I think that's been a source of frustration for fans at different times, probably when they haven't dug deeper into their pockets. But from when FSG first came in, they were very clear that their plan was to build Liverpool up as a business, increase revenues, and then increased revenues would lead to investment in the squad. And, not just in terms of transfer fees, but you only have to look at the way in which the wage bill has just gone up and up and up, because, Liverpool didn't used to offer the kind of salaries that attracted the best and kept hold of the best, but they do now. And I think Tom Werner said, I remember him saying that, the first time he met Klopp, they were just blown away by him in terms of, I think they clearly had some very sound advice in terms of who they should be speaking to and who they should be looking to attract. And of course, it's well known that they also spoke to Carlo Ancelotti around that time as well. But yeah, in terms of nailing a job interview, I think I don't think anyone's done it quite like Klopp when he met FSG for the first time, because I think they were pretty convinced before they met him that he was the perfect fit for Liverpool. And after a couple of hours in his company in I think it was a law firm in New York, in Manhattan, that they met him. I think after a few hours, they were, Tom Werner, John Henry, and Mike Gordon were 100% convinced that he would be taking Liverpool to places, and their judgment's been proved right.
It absolutely has, and I think the way they work, I do believe that if he wants backing, he'll get it. And if he wants to, if they believe, I believe that if they want to back him and he says, no, hold off, I'm happy with what I have, I think that works as well. And that's where the trust comes in. And when you're describing a guy as exceptional and you have the utmost respect and trust for him, whether he wants to spend a lot or spend nothing, you have to back him. There's no difference for me. But just looking, I've spoken there about the lack of movement with regards to transfers last summer. And then you look at this summer. And one thing that struck me from the piece with Tom Werner and going into Jurgen Klopp and stuff was, you know, they felt that Oxlade-Chamberlain would come on. Brewster, they felt like he was at a level. And you see Brewster's left the club now this summer. What do you feel has changed this summer? Because, you know, they do go and Thiago's a bonus for me, but they go and they identify what they need. You know, Lallana and Lovren leave and they're good squad members, but you bring in Tsimikas, you bring in Jota for what people believe is a big fee. But what do you feel has changed this season? Have they just looked at it throughout last season and said, yeah, brilliant season, but we do need A, B and C? You know, because reading that book and then seeing what's happened with Brewster, I thought, oh, wow, things do really change in a year.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, that, you know, it's so difficult to try and predict, isn't it? And you know, and you have your kind of your plans in place, and and then inevitably over the course of the season you have to react to so many different situations that you find yourselves in. And I think the summer of 2019, I remember Liverpool saying very early on that it would be quiet in terms of transfers because they'd committed a vast amount of money to new contracts over, I think, probably the 12 months leading up to that, to nail down pretty much every key member of personnel on, you know, huge, you know, I think they were talking about 150, 200 million pound commitment in terms of those new contracts. So that certainly had a part in why that window was so quiet. And also, I think when they took a step back, they actually went, well, actually, it's quite difficult to improve what we've got here. And they felt as if they were well equipped. And of course, with the season Liverpool then went on to have, that judgment was proved to be spot on, I think. And I think also even back then there was a feeling that 2020 would be busier, that 2019 will keep our powder dry. There's no real need to go and do anything silly. But, you know, of course, then we can hold it back for 2020. Now, of course, they didn't know at the time that a global pandemic would strike and that revenues would get absolutely decimated. And but it was, you know, and again, that's another example of just having to react and try and make the best of it. And I think, you know, the big thing for me in terms of when you look back on that window just gone for Liverpool was Michael Edwards again had to be incredibly clever and shrewd with the way in which he went about his business, because money was pretty thin on the ground. And, you know, the Thiago deal and the one for Diogo Jota, you know, the big attraction for Liverpool, which enabled them to get those deals done, was that it involved very little in terms of down payments. You know, in terms of the first installments, I think the one for Thiago was kind of 5 million and 4.5 million for Jota, and you know, and of course the Thiago saga went on a long time. But, you know, again, when you, with the benefit of hindsight, you think, well, actually, you know, despite Bayern's best attempts to try and create a bit of an auction for Thiago, there wasn't one, because Klopp had done an absolute number in terms of convincing Thiago that Liverpool was the best place for his development. And then we reached the point where Bayern, you know, they were just desperate for it not to overshadow the start of the Bundesliga season, and Liverpool got a world-class midfielder for a relatively low fee. So yeah, you know, shrewd deals like that have been at the heart of why Liverpool have enjoyed the glory they have done the past couple of seasons.
They have, and I suppose the budget they've done it on makes it even a bit more exceptional for me. Now, I know you're mentioning 150 to 200 million committed on contracts, and I know they're very heavily weighed bonus-wise for success that the team have and stuff like that. But when you look at that sort of money, and then you look at the problem with a global pandemic that affects you from March, and it's still affecting you today. You don't have fans and grounds. You're probably not getting paid as much TV money or revenue from sponsors and stuff like that, because they want to see their name in lights, I suppose, every time you play at Anfield or whatever it might be. So I think it was an exceptional. I think you're right. I think, you know, Michael Edwards gets a lot of credit amongst the Liverpool fan base and across social media, and he's every right to. It's not only him that's doing these deals, of course, but, you know, he's the man that's front and centre for most people, and the likes of 4.5 and 5 million up front for Diogo Jota and Thiago Alcantara is exceptional business, to be honest with you. One thing that has come out of the transfer window, though, James, and it relates back to the Merseyside derby last weekend, And there was talk around we'll be signing another centre back because, of course, Dejan Lovren did leave, and you were looking at Joe Gomez, John Matip, Virgil van Dijk, and possibly Fabinho being earmarked as an emergency backup. And of course, with the injury to Virgil van Dijk last Saturday afternoon, you know, people have again come back and said, should we have done something in the summer? Fabinho was outstanding last night against Ajax, in fairness, but A, what did you make of the whole Virgil van Dijk situation? And B, do you think Liverpool can just muddle through this and get the best out of a Gomez, Matip, Fabinho, you know, trio as the season goes on, and maybe look to next summer before they do anything on this?
Yeah, I think on the first point, of course, it goes without saying it, an absolute hammer blow what happened with Van Dijk last weekend, because he's just been absolutely integral, hasn't he, to everything that Liverpool have achieved over the last 2.5, getting on for 3 years, and he's just been there every step of the way. You know, he's been this rock, and I think, you know, the big thing, I think you only had to see the kind of the reaction from Klopp and from the players who have done media in the week since the derby, of just how much it's affected them all, because, you know, it's not just what Liverpool are losing as a player in terms of, you know, the best centre half in world football, you know, just the absolute, you know, everything you would want in a commanding centre half. It's that personality that, you know, he's such a popular figure, and such a big figure as well in the dressing room and on the pitch in terms of being a leader. So to have that wrestled away is very tough to take, and even tougher to take because of the circumstances in which it happened, because, you know, injuries happen in football, but, you know, when it happens as a result of such a reckless, dangerous challenge, you know, I think it cuts that bit deeper, especially as Wijnaldum said himself in the press conference before the Ajax game. You know, he said, you know, even more frustrating the fact that Jordan Pickford, who was responsible for that, has got away scot-free and hasn't even been banned, which, you know, absolutely, you know, scratching my head last weekend at how on earth the officials between them, Michael Oliver and David Coote on the VAR, how they possibly made such a pig's ear of that, and then for them not to be subsequent, you know, retrospective punishment. So yeah, it's a huge setback, and that was why it felt like the Ajax win was so key, because it wasn't convincing, but in terms of just lifting everyone's spirits and just showing that, you know what, this team is capable of digging deep and winning games without Van Dijk. And, you know, there might be a lot of other games like that this season where it's not particularly pretty, but they just have to fight and scrap. And you know, Fabinho was absolutely fantastic, and I think we're going to see a hell of a lot more of him at centre half. In terms of the transfer side of things, you know, it's not just the benefit of hindsight. I wrote a few times in the summer that I felt centre half was an absolute priority in terms of bringing in a signing, because say what you like about Love, but he played, I think, 15 games last season. So, you know, I just thought it was a real risk going into the season without replacing him. And I know the thinking behind it. The thinking was that, you know what, money is pretty thin on the ground this summer. There's other areas that we really, really do need to strengthen. We need a backup left back. We need better cover for the front three. THIAGO's a no-brainer in terms of being able to sign a world-class player for a modest amount of money. But, you know, I just didn't really sit right with me, mainly because of Matip's injury record. The fact that, you know, last weekend at Goodison was the first time he'd completed 90 minutes in the Premier League for nearly 12 months, which is crazy, especially in a season as well, where, you know, the schedule is just absolutely relentless now. You know, I think Ajax is the first of, I think, 6 games for Liverpool in the space of 17 days. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So it's, you know, it was a risk, and of course it's backfired with losing Van Dijk. And I think Liverpool will have to do something about it in the January window. You know, I know they've kind of played down so far the prospect of having to dip into the market, but I don't really see how Liverpool can get from now till the end of May with what they've got, because you know, Fabinho will definitely play a lot of football there, and I think him and Gomez could prove a really beneficial partnership. But you're still going to need, I think, another option. You know, I think the only thing that would potentially convince probably Klopp and Edwards that you don't need that is if Reece Williams was to to really hit the ground running, when we saw him get a little taste of it in the Champions League. And he's a really exciting talent, Reece Williams. But again, it's a huge ask for a teenager to essentially someone who was playing in Conference North non-league football only 6 or 7 months ago. So I think the other thing from the Ajax game that struck me was, for all the doom and gloom surrounding the loss of Van Dijk, Liverpool have got unbelievable amount of firepower this season. When you're able to bring off Salah, Mane, Firmino and throw on Jota, Shaqiri and Minamino, that's an amazing position to be in. And we may well see Liverpool having to really go and outscore teams, and a little bit of a throwback maybe to those early days under Klopp when Liverpool were vulnerable defensively at times, but had the firepower to beat anyone, and that might be the way to go, because I'm not sure Liverpool are gonna be able to consistently keep teams out without Van Dijk.
Yeah, I agree with you, and as good as Fabinho is a centre back, I don't think you can expect him to hold down centre back for the whole season, because you do have a Matip that the injury record is just deteriorating all the time. Joe Gomez, in fairness to him, he's had impact injuries, and the only thing that stops Joe Gomez at times is just lack of concentration, maybe a little dip in form. And as Liverpool, with the amount of centre-backs we currently have, one being a centre midfielder, you can't really afford a dip in form. Whereas Van Dijk is there, you possibly can, and you mix and match those three against Van Dijk. What's happened, Van Dijk, is a freak injury, and it's one thing where, if you lose Van Dijk for 4 or 5 weeks, you go, okay, grand. But when you lose him for that, to a freak injury, you give people a little bit of leeway with regards to what they've done in the window. I agree with you, though. I think coming to this window, I think Liverpool always plan their transfers, 12, 18 months in advance sometimes. I think they might have to bring this one forward, wherever they have planned, and make a move in January. Not only because Van Dijk is out, but you don't know how long he's going to be out for. You don't know what he's like when he comes back. And that's always the risk you take, no matter how good the player or the athlete. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. I want to bring you forward on another part of the book. Excuse me. And it was an article or a story you wrote on the 26th of December 2019. Liverpool have come back as World Club champions, and they go to Leicester. And I remember the media telling people that, if Leicester win this against tired Liverpool, the title race is on. Liverpool go and win that game 4-0 and go 13 points clear, I think, at the time. And, for me, James, it was the day when, I think it was the day Liverpool were confirmed as champions, I'm going to be honest with you. But the story you wrote was around Trent Alexander-Arnold. And the reason that it stood out for me in the book is because as much praise as Trent Alexander-Arnold has gotten since he made his debut, probably 2016, I think, maybe, he's got plenty of credit. The assists have been there, recognition with England. He's got awards for different things. But that day for me, James, is the day that Trent Alexander-Arnold announced himself absolutely as the best right back in the world, simply based on that performance. It's the highlight of the season for me, I'm going to be honest with you, that game. But that performance was just utterly exceptional.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. I don't think I've ever seen... I'd never seen a right back completely and utterly dominate a game to the extent that Trent Alexander-Arnold did that night, because I think, and I remember writing the piece about how it almost made a mockery of this idea that Trent Alexander-Arnold needs to be moved into midfield to be more influential, because it was like, how can you be more influential than that? He's just absolutely bossed this game. I think, what did he have, 2 assists and a goal night? And you're right about the significance of that game. I think if you were drawing up probably 2 or 3 absolutely pivotal results en route to winning the title, then that would be right up there, Leicester away. Because I just remember all the noise around that game as well was, Liverpool are going to be tired. This is going to be a real struggle. I think it's kind of forgotten as well because of what happened to Leicester in the last few months of the season, where they completely and utterly collapsed. At the time, Leicester were Liverpool's nearest challengers. There was, around that time, there was still talk of, right, do you know what? If Leicester can beat Liverpool here, then Leicester are in the title race, and and of course there'd been all the business where Liverpool had to field the youth team in the Carabao Cup against Villa, and two real energy sapping games in really hot conditions over in Qatar that I was over there for. And so to go to Leicester and to absolutely demolish them like Liverpool did that night, I think it wasn't all. I think it was partly what it did for Liverpool, but I think it was also what it did to everyone else, because it was just like, I think for everyone else it was soul destroying, wasn't it? Because it was like, they're not going to get stopped. They've just been halfway around the world playing a couple of extra games, and they've come back and they've done that to the second best team in the Premier League on current form. So yeah, that was like one of those nights where you're like, this is an absolute pleasure and an honor to be able to say I was here to watch that.
It really was, and I think that's the game I've watched back most. The way you watch back games, because you just do these things. But I think that's probably the most watched back game I've watched, I would say, easily in the last 10 years, easily, because it's one of those that you record and you just, when you hit the keep button and you never want to get rid of it, and every so often you're sitting there, nothing's on the TV, and you just go, I'll lash this on, because it was just it was an education Leicester were given on the night. It was an education in controlled, aggressive football, littered with flair, littered with everything, forced at every dropping ball, every second ball. Liverpool were on top of it. They played some outstanding football, but it jumped out at me in the book because of the Trent thing and moving him into midfield, and I'm completely against it. That's why I wanted to see your thoughts on it, and I was delighted to see it in the book, because I'm completely against it. You don't have to be in the middle of the park to control a game. You simply don't. We've seen many centre halves over the years control games. Ronald Koeman used to do it all day long for Barcelona. All day long he would do it. Trent's doing it from Maldini could do it from left back for AC Milan. And Trent is just of that ilk, because he has everything that you want in a footballer. And I think you limit him a bit by putting him into the middle of the park, because you're not giving him that outlet to put balls into the box the way he does. He's an unbelievable talent, and that day for me was just stood out so much. Just to let people know, we have got 3 copies of this book to give away. So what we're going to do is, after the show, I'm going to get James's favourite goal from 2019-20. If people want to have a think about that, don't throw it in the comments though, because you might give it away. You might give people ideas. But when the show is over, go into the comments on YouTube and just put in your favourite goal from 2019-20. If it matches James, we get the name in the hat, and we give away 3 copies of this book. James, before I let you go, and thanks a million for your time again, I want to talk about one last thing from the book, and it's an article you wrote in July of 2020, and it's after Liverpool have been crowned champions. And the one thing that stood out to me about this one was, and it stands out to me quite a lot, it's one where you write about Jurgen Klopp, okay, and the nutrition around Liverpool Football Club, and how it's always, he always seems to make it about somebody else when he's trying to give credit. Mona Nemmer is the person that comes up in this article, and she's looks after all the nutrition, the meal plans. During COVID, she was making sure food was delivered. She teaches the players and their families how to cook. She does it all. This woman. But what stood out for me was, when you see Klopp and he's talking about, you see him on TV when we win the league and we're crowned champions and we get the trophy, and he's on TV and they want to know about Jurgen Klopp, and he's telling the camera that it's for the fans. And this here, he's so good at including his backroom staff, isn't he, and everybody around the club in every success that they have.
Yeah, he is, and I think I was lucky enough over the course of last season to speak to and interview a lot of the people that work with Klopp as part of that backroom staff and on a daily basis, and they all talk about this amazing atmosphere that all stems from Klopp, where it's like a culture of excellence and striving for perfection that everyone buys into, and I think what makes Klopp so special is that he's this huge personality. He's this. In terms of knowledge and man management and the way in which he deals with situations, and psychology wise, I've never met a manager like him in terms of being able to find the right words at the right time. And let's not forget, that's not his first language. he's a master at the way in which he gets the best out of people. But he's this huge personality on one hand, but then he also, unlike I think a lot of other elite managers, he doesn't surround himself with yes men. He doesn't want people saying how brilliant he is, and he doesn't think. The other thing with him as well, he doesn't think he knows everything, and that then leads him to saying, "Do you know what? I'm good at what I do, but I need experts around me, and I'm not threatened by having loads of experts, and I want the best in their field in all the different departments, and whether that Mona Nemeth going to get her from Bayern Munich, Andreas Kornmeier, the fitness coach, he came from Bayern as well. The people sniggering when it came out that he recruited Thomas Gronemark as a throw-in coach, and what on earth do you need a throw-in coach for? And all those little things, and it's just like a 1% here and there, and restructuring the sports science department, restructuring the way that things are done with the physio department, and all those little things. It might only be a 0.5% here or there, but it all adds up. And people obviously refer to it these days as kind of a marginal gains approach. And I thought the nutrition side of things was quite an interesting perspective, where thankfully my job at the Athletic now, you get a lot more kind of time and space to kind of trying to be creative ahead of around different games where there might not be an obvious theme to write about. So you think, right, well, I'll write about this week and try and find out what are the players eating, what are they, especially on the back of a midweek game where it's all about refueling and having their protein shakes and the rehab shakes, and I think all these like signs around Melwood saying like carb power, and reminding them that you need to carb up the next couple of days. And it's just it doesn't happen by when a club has a season like Liverpool had in 1920. It's so many people contribute to it, and it's testament to what the structure that Klopp has put in place, because he has brought in so many different elite people in so many different fields. Right down to things like players having apple juice at half time laced with caffeine, and and having like juice bars in the dressing room, and fresh pasta and all these homemade sauces. And people will say, well, does that really make that much of a difference? Well, look at the end product. Look at what might be a very small thing. You add lots and lots of little small things together, and you can create something very, very big. And I thought even right down, I did another piece which I'm not sure whether it ended up in the book or not, but on like the pitch at Anfield, like the changes that have been made to the grass. And again, like when I wrote it, some people, especially on like social media, would be like, oh my god, why are you writing about the grass?
You're setting yourself up there, James, to be honest.
Yeah, but then you speak to the players, and anyone, how many times have we heard Klopp go on about the pitch was too dry, or it was it was too windy or whatever, or just all those little things that people accuse him of making excuses at times when they don't go well. And it's all about all of that work behind the scenes. I just found intriguing, whether it's nutrition, whether it's the pitch, whether it's the sports science, whether it's bringing in the Lee Richardson as the new sports psychologist to work on the mental side with the players. It's just this constant search for, is there another little thing we can do? What else can we do? And I think sometimes people kind of overlook that, because with Klopp, people, everyone focuses only on the Klopp hugs, that, he's just this charismatic personality and he just goes around hugging people. And it's like, there's a lot more to it than that.
There really is a lot more to it than that. And, he's front and centre for Liverpool Football Club, and rightfully so. He's the manager of the club. And, he's showered with admiration. People think he hugs, and they love his personality. People admire him. They give him a hell of a lot of credit. And it goes on and on and on. And it's only going to get bigger and bigger as the success comes. The European Cup in 2019, the league in 2020, and whatever's to come in the next 4 years minimum. But for me, the mark of the man is that Yeah, he may take it all on his shoulders, and yeah, they might talk about him from, in a standard season from August to May, but he's always makes a point of letting people know who's around them and what input they've had and how important they are. And I think that's an amazing trait to have as not only a football manager but as a person in any walk of life or business. So that's why it stood out for me in the book. James, I'm not going to let you tell me your favourite goal because you'll give away answers to competitions and that's not allowed. But I will ask you before you go, just quickly, your moment of the season.
Do you know what? My moment of the season would have to be when Mo Salah ran half the length of Anfield to score against Manchester United, because and I think it's funny actually when you look back now and when I think of it, you kind of think, did we not all know by then that Liverpool were going to win the league? Because it was almost like we were so far ahead already. But for me, that was the moment of the season, just because I was lucky enough to be inside Anfield that day, and it was just that outpouring of emotion that followed Salah scoring that goal, because it was United, of course, it was always going to be cherished beating them, and it had been a narrow lead, and it had been quite a nervy last 10-15 minutes before Mo ran away and slotted past De Gea. But I think it was more kind of the build up to that, because I think for a few months, everyone I knew and mates and stuff were like whispering, like, we're going to win the league. Like, this is it. This is the year. This is like, but it was like, I mean, the number of conversations I'd have, which would then end with someone going, shut up, don't say it, don't say it. Don't tempt fate, because we've been here before, we've been stung before. There's a long way to go. Like, you're almost like bracing yourself for something spectacularly badly to happen, to throw a spanner in the works. And little did we know at the time there was a global pandemic around the corner that was going to do its best to ruin the party. But yeah, that was the moment for me, because I think it was almost like 50-odd thousand inside Anfield. Once Mo scored that goal, it was like, do you know what? We've been saying it privately for quite some time, and now we're going to tell the world that, now you're going to believe us. We're going to win the league. And that, that absolutely boomed around Anfield that day. And I don't think anyone was in any doubt anywhere, I think, from that moment on, that trophy would be coming back to Anfield.
Yeah, do you know what? I think it's the opposition that make it the day it is. And for a couple of reasons. Like you said, you cherish beating Manchester United wherever you play them. It doesn't matter if it's in a game of chess. You want to beat Manchester United. But Liverpool fans over the years have had a lot of false dawns around the winning the league title, and I would say there's a lot going to that game or watching that game around the world going, if there's one team that could do us here today and cause us to stumble in a massive way, you could guarantee it's going to be Manchester United, because that's just who Manchester United have been for the last 25 odd years. But like you said, when Mo Salah scores that, people get too giddy, they get too excited, and they're like, no, I can't hold this in anymore. You just can't. You can't hold it in anymore, and you're going to have to. And you know what it is? People don't want to lose the time to cherish it, so they feel like they have to get it out, because if you wait until, pandemic aside, if the season goes on as normal and finishes on the 18th of May, I think it was due to finish, you don't want to wait till the start of April and wait and then enjoy yourself. They wanted to start enjoying themselves then. They wanted to make the absolute most of it. But it's a cracking pick for your moment of the season. And of course, I will get your goal of the season afterwards. But James, thanks a million for your time. I know you've been mad busy today, so making time for us, I really appreciate it. For anybody out there, at the end of the storm, from The Athletic, James Pearce, Oliver Kay, Simon Hughes, and loads more in between the covers of this book as well. 3 copies to give away. Pick your goal of 2019-20. Stick it in the comments, not the live comments, the comments on the show itself. And if you match James's choice, you will go into a draw, and we've 3 copies to give away. But James, the last thing I want to say, I just want to congratulate you and all the writers, The Athletic, the Backpage Press, everybody involved in this book, because it is a tremendous read. And again, thanks for joining me this evening.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks ever so much.
Cheers. That has been the special from the LFC Daytrippers. Back tomorrow night with your Friday forecast, and we'll have a look at all the weekend's football. Over and out.